What you are about to hear is one of the most powerful declarations ever delivered on Nigerian soil. Two men, one born in Biafra, now locked in a prison cell. The other, an American who has crossed the Atlantic 16 times because what he witnessed here would not let him rest. Together, they stood before the world and spoke the kind of truth that governments fear. Watch this.
We come from different worlds. One of us, Mazi Nnamdi Kanu, was born in Biafra as a Biafran and now sits in a prison cell built to silence him. The other, Mike Arnold, was born in the United States of America, where this declaration is being delivered, and has crisscrossed the ocean 16 times because what he saw here would not let him leave. We do not walk the same road, yet we have arrived at the same conviction. Today we speak as one to every person of conscience on this land, every tribe, every region, every faith. We share one enemy and one future. When darkness covers a people, when truth tellers are jailed, when a government's full-time work is hiding mass graves, that is the hour when boldly speaking truth can topple tyrants and set the people free. That hour is now. It is time to rise. The hour demands it. The scale of suffering is staggering. Hundreds of thousands killed in recent decades alone. Millions displaced from their ancestral homes. The darkness has many faces. The historical legacy of jihadist conquest, Boko Haram, ISIS affiliates, armed Fulani militias, lobbyists in Washington, and tyrants in Aso Rock who enrich themselves while denying the dead. By 1900, the Sokoto Caliphate was among the largest slave societies in modern history. The genocidal Biafran-Nigerian War claimed some 3.6 million lives, according to official estimates, with Irish missionaries putting the figure closer to 5 million, many through starvation. Since 2009, credible reports document more than 180,000 deaths, more than 19,000 churches burned or destroyed, and the displacement of as many as 10 to 12 million people from their ancestral homes. Children grow up in squalid camps the regime denies exist, surrounded by the ideology that murdered their parents. This is not farmer-herder conflict, not climate change, not a misunderstanding. This is conquest, one of the longest patterns of targeted violence and displacement in modern history. It ends now. The violence is not inevitable. It is the result of choices that can be confronted and reversed by the sovereign will of the people. We hold these truths. Every human being on this land, every tribe, every tongue, every faith, is made in the image of God and possesses inherent dignity and the right to life, liberty, and self-determination. Every person has the right to live in peace in the home of their fathers. The displaced must return home. Their safe return and full restoration come before all other national work. Until they are home safe, with justice and restitution, nothing else is finished. We acknowledge without hesitation or qualification the pain, suffering, and injustice endured by the oppressed of every tribe, every ethnic group, and every region across this land. No community holds a monopoly on grief. From north to south, east to west, millions have borne the weight of violence, corruption, neglect, and broken promises. Their blood, their tears, and their stolen futures cry out for justice, just the same. They too are entitled to freedom, dignity, and security, no less than any Biafran, no less than any Nigerian. We do not seek liberty for our one people alone, but for all who suffer under injustice. The society we demand is one rooted in freedom, equity, justice, fairness, and the uncompromising supremacy of the rule of law. These ideals are not optional. They are irreducible, non-negotiable, and the minimum standard we demand from those who govern and from ourselves. A government is legitimate only with the consent of the governed. When it arms killers, bulldozes camps of displaced citizens, and pays foreign press agents to deny mass graves, it has lost the right to govern. Self-determination is not a crime. It is a fundamental, inalienable right enshrined in the supreme law of the land and in binding international instruments solemnly ratified by Nigeria herself. Nigeria's constitution, the apex legal instrument of the Federal Republic, declares in unambiguous terms that sovereignty and power belong to the people, not to any cabal that looted and rigged its way to Abuja. Beneath the Constitution sits the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which occupies the second highest position in the hierarchy of Nigerian law. What makes this even more damning is an innocuous but explosive provision in Nigeria's own Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act of 2022. Section 2, subsection 3F expressly provides that any act which constitutes a breach of the African Charter on Human and People's Rights is, by that very fact, an act of terrorism under Nigerian law. Let the world hear this clearly.
Every word of it. What just happened in that speech? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Afrisight Forum, the channel where we bring you the stories that matter, the voices they try to silence, and the truth that power cannot afford for you to hear. I am your host, and today we are breaking down one of the most consequential public declarations to emerge from the Nigerian political space in recent memory. A speech jointly delivered by Mazi Nnamdi Kanu and American activist Mike Arnold. A speech that did not ask for permission. A speech that declared, with clarity and without apology, that the long night of oppression over the peoples of this land is ending, whether those in power agree to it or not. Let us walk through what was said, because every sentence in that declaration carries weight. The opening charge. The speech opened with a truth that most people in comfortable positions prefer to avoid. That two men from completely different worlds, one born into Biafra and now imprisoned for daring to speak, the other born in the freest country on earth, have arrived at the same conviction through different roads. That conviction is simple. Something is catastrophically wrong in Nigeria, and silence is no longer an option for anyone with a conscience. They addressed every tribe, every region, every faith, not just Igbo, not just the Southeast, every person on this land. And that is a deliberate and important framing, because the moment you expand the circle of those being spoken to, you expand the circle of those who must reckon with the message. The numbers that cannot be ignored. Then they went to the data, and this is where the speech moved from rhetoric into documentation. They cited hundreds of thousands killed in recent decades, millions displaced from ancestral lands, more than 19,000 churches burned or destroyed since 2009, between 10 and 12 million people uprooted from the homes of their fathers. And they drew a direct historical line from the Sokoto Caliphate, which by 1900 was among the largest slave societies in the modern world, through the genocidal Biafra-Nigerian War that took between 3.6 and 5 million lives, many through deliberate starvation, all the way to the present-day violence that the Nigerian government insists on framing as farmer-herder clashes or climate conflict. They rejected that framing completely. They called it what it is: conquest, targeted, systematic, historical, and long overdue for a reckoning. The legal argument that puts the government in its own trap. Now here is where the speech becomes a legal and political masterstroke, and I want you to pay close attention to this section because it is remarkable. The speakers invoked Nigeria's own laws against the Nigerian government. They cited the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which occupies the second highest position in Nigeria's legal hierarchy, beneath only the Constitution itself. Article 20 of that charter guarantees the right to self-determination. The systematic violation of that right, they argued, is not just a human rights concern. It becomes something far more explosive when you read it alongside Section 2, subsection 3F of Nigeria's Terrorism Prevention and Prohibition Act 2022, which expressly states that any act constituting a breach of the African Charter is, by that very fact, an act of terrorism under Nigerian law. Think about that. The same government that imprisoned Nnamdi Kanu and labeled him a terrorist has, through its own legislation, provided the legal framework to classify its own actions as terrorism. The cage they built for him has their own fingerprints on every bar, and this declaration forced that fact into the global record. On self-determination and sovereignty. The speech was equally emphatic on the constitutional question. Nigeria's own constitution declares that sovereignty belongs to the people, not to any cabal that rigged and looted its way to a so rock. Self-determination is not sedition. It is not extremism. It is a right enshrined in the highest laws of the land and in international instruments that Nigeria has ratified and is therefore bound by. Seeking a free vote is not violence. Speaking truth is not terrorism. The denial of those rights, the speakers argued, is where the real terrorism lives. The call to unity. What struck many observers about this speech was its deliberate inclusivity. At a moment when many expected separatist language directed at the Southeast alone, the declaration explicitly acknowledged the suffering of every tribe, every region, every faith across the whole of Nigeria, from north to south, east to west. It stated plainly that no community holds a monopoly on grief. And it extended the demand for freedom, dignity, and justice to every Nigerian, not only to Biafrans. This is a significant reframing. It transforms the message from one of ethnic grievance into one of universal human rights, and it challenges every Nigerian of conscience, regardless of where they come from, to ask themselves whether they are standing with the people or standing with the system that is bleeding all of them. On force and resistance. The speakers were careful here, but they were not weak. They did not call for violence. They explicitly rejected vengeance and unjust aggression, but they also refused the label of passive victims. They affirmed without apology that every people has the God-given right to defend its life, protect its families, and secure its communities. They drew a clear line between defense and what they oppose, and they called on the people to hold that line. They invoked the civil rights movement in Birmingham. They invoked the March to Dundee. They invoked the fall of apartheid, and the message from all three examples was identical. Freedom was not granted. It was built and taken by people who counted the cost and paid it anyway. The verdict. So what do we make of all this on Afrisight Forum? Here is my read. This declaration is significant on at least 3 levels. First, it is a legal document. It places on record, in public, the argument that the Nigerian state is in violation of its own anti-terrorism law through its treatment of self-determination advocates. That is a paper trail that human rights bodies, international courts, and future historians will reference. Second, it is a political document. It attempts to build a coalition across ethnic and regional lines by reframing the struggle as one for all oppressed Nigerians, not one people alone. Third, and perhaps most powerfully, it is a moral document. It ends not with a threat, but with a vision. A Nigeria where the North is liberated from terror, the Middle Belt is healed, the South controls its resources, and a new constitutional order written by the people through genuine consent finally gives this land the future its people have always been capable of building. The speech closed with these words, and they deserve to be the last words here as well. The cause is life. The cause is liberty. The cause is the right of every human being on this land to live in peace in the home of their fathers, to worship freely, to vote freely, to build freely. That cause is worth everything. This is Afrisight Forum. Stay awake, stay informed, and never stop asking the questions they do not want answered.